Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published, more than gossip and chatter, covering current events.
Greetings wherever you are in the universe. This is Ark Republic's 2024 elections. This is election night, and I am here with, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Sebastian Prats. I'm here live from New York at my friend's apartment in an election watch party in what is no doubt going to be a very long and very stressful election, no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on.
That is correct, and I'm in my tin can in Philly. So,
Crucial state.
Yes, the swing state. I'll be talking. I actually already talked about a little bit about my voting experience earlier, but let's talk about what is that you wrote actually two pieces talking about Puerto Rico's stance in large about Trump prior to the rally and after the rally. What's the mood from what you've been hearing on the ground in Puerto Rico first?
In Puerto Rico, people are very, very upset with Trump. You had, like, as I mentioned in the article about Puerto Rico's reaction, Angel Cintron, he's the chairman of the Republican Party in Puerto Rico. He said he will not be voting for Donald Trump unless he personally apologizes for the comments made at the Madison Square Garden rally. And even though Puerto Rico does not have a right to vote in presidential elections, this is a new year in respect to that because there is a presidential preference ballot. Now, even though that ballot does not have any consequence when it comes to the election on the national level, it is a gauge for how Puerto Ricans ultimately feel about these candidates and how generally, if Puerto Rico were a state or if Puerto Rico were afforded the right to vote for president, where it would lean, how it would vote. And the fact that Angel Cintron has condemned those comments and condemned President Trump for that rally, it really shows that Puerto Ricans will prioritize respect and pride before voting for candidates who allow for these things. Now, the Trump campaign has, through a spokesperson, apologized, but Trump himself has not apologized directly. He has deflected by saying he didn't know the comedian, wasn't there for that part of the rally, and ultimately has dodged the question and remained largely in the same stance as he was before this. Now, even though Puerto Ricans do not get to vote from the island, they are a crucial population in swing states, especially Pennsylvania, where Puerto Ricans are slightly over 3% of the population, and there are over 400,000 in the state. And the reason Pennsylvania especially matters so much is because it is the common denominator for the Harris campaign and for the Trump campaign for their paths to victory. Harris is depending primarily on the Rust Belt with the known blue wall strategy, whereas the Trump campaign is largely looking at the East Coast, with North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania being the states that campaign needs to win and needs to take to be able to put Trump back in the White House. So the fact that there's so many Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, and that is likely one of the closest states for this election, could tip the scales in favor of Harris.
Okay, yeah, this is, a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans are my neighbors. And so we've been seeing a lot of the signage going on. So thank you for keeping us abreast on that. I know we will be doing post reporting in terms of what that looks like, but you are in the NYC. So what's the mood in New York?
The mood is definitely optimistic. Folks are excited. Walking around today for class, for my own personal business, there were a lot of folks wearing Harris Walls shirts, hats, things that demonstrate publicly their support and their preference. Now, New York is obviously going to go blue, and New York City is known for being blue. But the reason this matters is because New York City has also been a hub for pro-Palestine protests, which have been openly critical of the Biden-Harris administration. So folks being able to go out and signal this, that they're still supporting Kamala Harris, shows that they know that despite these things that have gotten her a lot of criticism from a key voter base in Michigan, specifically with Muslim American voters, they're still behind her and they are still backing her, which is a very crucial indicator for what this looks like in terms of potentially undecided voters that are not undecided between Trump and Harris, rather undecided between Harris Jill Stein or not voting at all, specifically over the issue of Gaza.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of discourse around how are you Palestinian, or how have you had these critiques against the Biden-Harris administration on what they haven't done or what they have done in Palestine, and still vote, for Harris. And some of the pushback is that even though I'm disappointed in what the position is now, does it not mean I'm going to fully abandon the party, because there's still negotiation room. So I'm glad that you definitely mentioned that. So what we're going to do now is that you canvassed.
Mhm.
Where did you canvass, and what was that like? Was this your first time canvassing, by the way?
Yes, this election cycle was my first time canvassing. Now, most of my canvassing was around New York State and crucial swing districts for a House majority. That was largely in suburbs, upstate New York, and the energy there is generally folks are getting tired of Donald Trump's rhetoric. And we've seen this before in the 2020 midterms where this MAGA style of campaign really only works with Donald Trump. And we see this in other Senate races like Ruben Gallego, where he, despite coming from a very close swing state being Arizona, he is up double digits in almost every single poll. And that's because his opponent, Carrie Lake, is extremely unpopular due to these MAGA policies and MAGA rhetoric. Now, the other place I canvassed was just one time this Sunday in Pennsylvania, and it was actually rural Pennsylvania. It was not Philly, it was Stroudsburg. And generally, that is a more pro-Trump, pro-Republican area. But the energy I see there is that Harris voters are determined to make the state go blue. One of the houses I visited was this lovely Puerto Rican couple, which was very excited about this election and very determined to not just support the vice president, but also make that support known in their community, even amongst neighbors who are pro-Trump. And you would see signs of houses right next to each other, one supporting Harris, the other supporting Trump. And this is more of a hunch, but there were a few households where the voters we were looking for were women, but it was men who answered the door and said that the household was pro-Trump. The impression that I got is that these households may be declared as Trump by the men, but the actual voters, the women in the House, will skew towards Harris because this is a big thing her campaign has leaned towards, which is women who are married to Republicans, married to pro-Trump Republicans, voting for Harris when they're at the polls because it's their choice and no one else has to know. And when it comes to polling, that is one thing that is much harder to capture. And it is possible there could be a polling error strongly in favor of Harris, specifically thanks to those women voters. And another point on that is more about Harris's candidacy, which it's that really that is mobilizing those voters was only something she could do. uh, Joe Biden could do a lot of things, but women seeing another woman at the top of the ticket and someone who can clearly communicate this rhetoric from a personal perspective as a woman makes a substantial difference. And we've seen this with women being like a substantially mobilized voter group in exit polls in crucial swing states like Georgia and North Carolina, which we might see the effect of that tonight. Even if Harris loses, if it's by smaller margins, I would wager it is likely due to women voters. And one last point on canvassing, one of the households we visited was for this Muslim American family, and the the issue that came up was Gaza. And basically what the voter said is he was undecided because he wants to vote with his heart and he hasn't seen an arms embargo, hasn't seen a permanent ceasefire. And the way he said it is that his people are being killed, and that has been under the Biden-Harris administration. So voting for her sounded like he said he intended to vote with his heart when he was at the polls, but he was distinctly conflicted.
Mm.
And what seemed to make him this I can't speak for him, but what made him more open to the idea of voting for Kamala Harris was, rather than seeing his vote, a hypothetical vote for her, as an endorsement of those policies, it is, who do you want to organize under and who are you trying to convince? Which has been a running argument, especially amongst progressive Democrats such as AOC, which has called for a permanent ceasefire and an arms embargo on Israel, effectively saying Donald Trump isn't movable on this, and he is worse in every single respect. Whereas Kamala Harris has changed her stance. She has called out Netanyahu personally in a televised address after a meeting with him over his military campaign in Gaza and now in Lebanon. And ultimately, if that rhetoric can push voters who are apprehensive about this, that could also be a deciding factor. Again, in a state like Michigan, which has a substantial Muslim American population, it's also the origin of the uncommitted movement, which made big waves at the DNC.
Right. And Representative Rashida Tlaib are, saying that she is going to withhold her endorsement for Harris as a result of that. So we definitely will see where that goes. I wanted us to now more so go into several key races that you want to talk about and explain why they are critical. And whoever wins on the other side, what do you think is going to happen?
Now, we have several key races, and right now we only have results for a few. I'm seeing this just now. 21% of the vote is in on Texas, and Colin Allred is actually leading Ted Cruz by a very small margin, being 0.6%. That was just updated a few seconds ago. It's actually 21% of the vote in. Colin Allred is at 49.3, Ted Cruz is at 48.7. If that seat flips, it is not just a big win for Democrats, but an omen for Republicans. Even though it's unlikely that Texas will go blue this cycle, if it shifts to being a swing state for 2028, that will be enormous, because that is a state that, to put it into perspective, if Harris would hypothetically take Texas, she could lose every single swing state and still win the election. Meaning that Texas would be a state that Republicans have to fight for, or they lose every single election moving forward. And it's a state that's been shifting blue ever since Obama's first election. Even though it's had strong Republican margins, those margins have been weakening and shrinking every single cycle. And Colin Allred is, even if he loses, the fact his campaign has been funded and the fact his election will likely be a close one is a strong indicator of what's to happen next. Now, you also have races like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, where we have 37% of the vote in, and he's up by 7 points. That is another big win for Democrats, which could mean either Ohio also teeters back into being a potential swing state, and it also, like all these Senate races, means a potential Senate majority, which in a hypothetical Harris win is incredible for passing a lot of the legislation she's promised and being able to fulfill her campaign promises. And in a hypothetical Trump win, it is the strongest line of defense against a lot of his promises and a lot of the policies that are officially under his campaign with Agenda 47, or as a lot of folks, especially on the Democratic side, have attributed to his campaign, despite claims otherwise from the Trump campaign, with Project 2025. The Senate is the last line of protection in a Trump win. We also have races like Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. Now, only 7% of the vote is in there right now, but he is at 72% versus Dave McCormick, the Republican, challenging him at 25%. For Democrats, unfortunately, West Virginia seems to be going to Jim Justice, meaning Republicans flip that seat red. That's been a projected win for Justice, even though 14% of the vote is in. He has around 2/3, sitting at 63.9%. Finally, in Virginia, Democrats seem to have a safe seat with Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's former running mate. Right now, 31% of the vote is in, but Kaine is up by 9 points. Rick Scott is the projected winner In Florida, he's up by 12 with 81% of the vote in. And just seeing this now, Texas got another update. Cruz is up by 0.6 points. So it's likely that that race is going
Yeah.
to be down to the wire. And Democrats are really going to push for Allred to take that race. Right now, we're not seeing any other major Senate races have results or have any major shifts, but that's kind of what the climate is like now. And it's really going to be a very important part of this election.
So I have a last question wrapping this up, and I do thank you for taking your time out of this very busy, hectic, and emotionally draining Tuesday.
Yes.
Which I know I want you to go and drink some tea, young man, when you finish. Um, Last question. You said earlier that this is going to be the results of the major elections are going to be tough, whoever wins. Could you expound on that? What do you mean? So what if a Trump win happens? How will that be tough? And if a Harris wins, how will that be tough in your perspective?
Now, a Harris win is going to be tough because, first, one of the few things that everyone is on the same picture is effectively guaranteed for this election, which is that if Trump loses, he will not accept the results. That and this election being close are the two things everyone has had effectively the same picture of and the same concern for. And that goes especially so if it is a close win for Harris. If it is a blue wall win with her taking Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, no other swing states. And if Pennsylvania is too close for comfort, Republicans may attempt to flip that or to outright deny it. And that could involve, even if Harris wins the Electoral College, Republicans taking it to Congress and overturning the results manually with a vote. Now, that will require Kamala Harris to certify that, which is obviously unlikely. But after January 6th, really anything is on the table for that, and things are a little too close for comfort. In terms of a Trump win, Democrats would be able to concede the race. And what that would mean, in addition to an obvious second Trump term, and what that involves is, I would say, the US nationally being pushed further to the right. Because if you look at issues like immigration, Trump set the terms for what that discussion looks like by winning in 2016. Even if it was by electoral college and not with the popular vote, the rhetoric Democrats are using are rhetoric that Trump established. And it also means issues like Gaza are pushed more towards the right because this is the most pro-Palestinian stance that the Democratic Party has officially taken. And if that turns out to be unelectable in the eyes of the party, they may not stick with that moving forward. It means also they may not nominate another woman for the next cycle, not another Black woman, not another Black person. They may nominate another Joe Biden for the next election cycle because they may feel that right now the US wouldn't be ready for a woman president or for a Black woman to be president, even in a hypothetical where she wins the popular vote and loses the electoral college, much like Hillary Clinton did in 2016. And overall, what it looks like is realistically, for a lot of Americans which belong to marginalized groups, it may be dangerous in no uncertain terms because, as the Harris campaign has made very clear to Americans in their advertising, and what many Republicans for Harris have made very clear, Trump is here to serve himself. And Trump has made that clear with comments like the other day where he said Liz Cheney should be shot. That is not a claim that Democrats are making of him. Those are the words that came out of his mouth. And with a lot of his team from his first term not joining him for a hypothetical second, it is still untread waters, even if we have seen what a Trump administration looks like from 2016 to 2020. Going back to a Harris one, however, she would inversely shift the US to the left. And we could even see for 2028 a presidential candidate from the Republicans like Nikki Haley. The reason, looking back at 2016, the reason Bernie Sanders could run for president was because we had 8 years of Obama that made that a campaign that could even dream of actually getting the candidacy. And he did get a lot of support within the Democratic Party. So we could see that again for the future with a Harris win. And an underrated point with a Harris win is what the Republican support looks like, especially for a re-election campaign, because obviously she'll want to keep that base, but she won't have Trump pushing those Republicans to her side. So
That's true.
really, if she wins, it will be a very big change for the two-party system and what political allegiances in the US look like, largely in Democrats' favor.
Mm.
But right now, we just know what could happen. And I've been looking at a map of the Senate race in across the states. Texas keeps flipping.
Huh.
Uh, it keeps going Cruz and all
Well,
red.
yeah,
Right now,
I'm not surprised about that race, and I do agree with you. I think Texas is going to experience a massive shift.
mhm,
A lot of tech companies from California, have moved to Texas. You have the serious issues with the border. You have a lot of people migrating of color, migrating to places like Houston and Dallas for more affordable living. So with that,
mhm.
the complexion and the complexion, is changing in Texas. Definitely the complexity. So I want to thank you so much for giving that insight, and I look forward to speaking with you post elections on what's going on. But for right now, I want you to stay safe, keep your ears to the ground, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you soon.
Will do. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners, to our viewers. We wish you a safe and mentally peaceful election to the degree which that may be possible.
I know, I feel like I'm going to sleep for 5 years after this. Thank you so much, Mr. Prats. I will speak to you later.